Welcome back to the One More K podcast. We are on episode number 31. Pleasure to be back. Thanks for joining us. We have today the Southeast Asian Triangle here. I'm in Vietnam. My name is Marcus. We have Ned from Bali.
Hey, everybody.
And we have a special guest, Salomon, all the way from Hong Kong. Good evening, good afternoon, Salomon.
Hello, thanks for having me.
I should rather say grüezi, because you are, I believe, Swiss. And anyone watching, you also realize that we have color coordinated. So all of us are wearing black T-shirts. It might be the color of the month.
Well, we can say, we're like the new ultra running boy band or something. Like we're all wearing the T-shirts side of it. This could be a thing. We never know.
Indeed. Salomon Wettstein, we are pleased to have you on our show. Thanks for joining us. We have an increasing amount of people from Hong Kong coming to the show. So that is great. Hong Kong is one of the epic trail centers in Asia. The introduction about Salomon, I thought we have, as usual, a running introduction and, of course, a business introduction. So I'm going to quickly do the business first, because I'm sure that's a bit shorter, given that you are the managing partner of Synpulse and the co-CEO of Synpulse8. It is a consultancy finance firm. I would roughly summarize it. More importantly, the running introduction is much longer because you have done amazing things the last 12 years. As far as I can see from your UTMB index, you have, for example, won the race of Lantau by UTMB 2020. Pretty impressive. You've been the finisher of the Hong Kong 4 trails in 51 minutes and 53 seconds. 51 hours and 53 minutes. I'm sorry.
51 minutes would be unbelievably impressive.
That's true. And many other trail runs you've done, including this year, of course. So yeah, a pretty impressive Southeast Asian and European running history. Thanks, Salomon, for joining us. We're very keen to dig in a few things on running, on business. You have a lot of perspectives on this, and you have been a big fan of the show. So even better for joining. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And yes, I'm a big fan, by the way, not only because you cover running in Asia very well, but you have a lot of entrepreneurs on the show. And I really like that as an entrepreneur. And it also shows to the people that there is more than just the actual event, the race itself. There's nutrition, there is preparation, there's the event organization. And I've listened and watched too many of your podcasts covering some of these entrepreneurs. So really cool.
I apologize, anyone out there. You have to deal with 2 German accents now on this show. So Ned, you're going to hopefully balance with your thick British accent. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so let's dig into the news. And I think that's actually funny that you are Swiss, because we had quite an exciting event the past weekend. We had the famous Sierre Zenal, the race of the 4,000s also called, where particularly interesting things has happened. Ned, do you want to quickly summarize the exciting event of this weekend? I would love to hear a comment afterwards, Salomon, as well.
Well, as you know, I'm an old slow man, and my world is backyard. And when I started ultra, nobody in ultra was going fast. You didn't need to go fast in the 90s. You just needed to kind of outlast people. And actually, Salomon sent me over the weekend some information that one of the guys, some of the runners here, the African runners, are like 104 half marathon guy, or maybe even quicker. And it was astonishing. I watched clips of it, and I saw some reels of Killian chasing down people. But these are, close to 1 hour marathon dudes, and they are hammering. I mean, that for Killian to get this, the way that he went at it, unbelievable to see it. It also shows, so 2 comments. Number 1, the speed is out of control. Salomon, would love to hear your thoughts on how ridiculously fast it is, because you actually had a comment in your recent race that was shortened, and you said, yeah, they're casually throwing in sub-4s along the way. These dudes are casually throwing in sub-3s along the way. It's nuts. And then also, it is the spread of nationalities from Africa to Europe to America is amazing. But Salomon, has trail got faster than road, or am I just imagining things?
If I may, as I'm Swiss, as you said, Marcus, and Sierre Zenal is actually an event that is more than 50 years old. So it's actually a really, really old trail running event. So people think always that trail running only started a few decades, but actually it started much longer ago. And if you had that on the screen before, you can see that not only there is more canyon runners, if you look at the background of the runners at Sierre Zenal, and by the way, it's not Sierra Zenal, it's Sierre Zenal, because it's the French-speaking part of Switzerland. You will see that there's always been a mix of road runners and trail runners and so on. So it's not a surprise that road runners do well, but the winner on the ladies' side, she has done her first trail race. She's really been on the roads before. You wouldn't have seen her name before, and she smashed it, she won. And on the men's side, the person who was leading for a while, the Kenyan runner, you said it before, Ned, he has a 1:09, I think, marathon time and a sub 1 hours half marathon time. So incredibly fast, but he burned his legs towards the end of the race, so Kilian catched him again. So what I really liked about the fact is that while there's more canyon runners, more road runners, still some of the old school trail runners like Kilian managed to win his 10th edition, and also he's probably won races now since 20 years. So since he was a young dude, as you would say, Ned, to now a bit of an older dude, not as old as we are, but older, he's still winning races. And what I find very impressive is also how he trained towards that race. So he also won Segama recently, a couple of months ago, so the short races again. So he really put all in to perform highly on these events. And we can talk about this later when I share a bit of my background. It's of course a lot of what goes into the preparation. And the other thing that I really love about Kilian is probably the only trail runner who wins frequently the short distance as well as the super long distance. I mean, this is just phenomenal, I can only say.
Is it so? No doubt you put those African runners on a 10K road race with Kilian. I'm going to assume Kilian's losing. I'm just going to assume. Is it just experience? Is it knowledge on the trails? That's how Kilian is still winning at his age, and relative, not going to say lack of speed because he has speed, but relative lack of speed to this 59-minute half marathon guy? Is it just trail experience that gets it done, Salomon?
No, I don't think so. Of course, experience helps, especially the longer the distance. But in this case, I mean, they all have done this race at least as a training session, even the new runners. And Philemon won the race last year, who was just a second or 2 seconds behind Kilian. So he was also experienced enough to really know what he needs to do. I think the fact is that Kilian prepares very specific to this, and he could probably also be one of the few trail runners who could be quite strong in road racing. He always says that he doesn't want to do road racing because he actually gets injured quite quick. So while he has the VO2 max and he has the leg speed, he's not used to run as much on the road. So that doesn't mean he wouldn't do well if he probably would have trained the past 20 years on the road. I mean, he can run a 10K under 30 minutes. We all know that. So he's fast enough. So
we should also highlight, of course, the females race quickly, that we had Jolene from Kenya also winning it with actually quite a bit of a 8-minute difference to the second scout, Atkin. Also another impressive performance by her. The fourth was also Kenyan, Philaris Jerutu Kesang. So we had 2 Kenyans in top 5 with the females, and we had 3 Kenyans in the top 5 with the males. Why are the Kenyans coming?
Money.
Yeah, so I mean, money for sure, but you see that there's especially one team, and it's actually the trainer there is an Austrian. So he also, of course, is coming from Europe, and he probably saw the gap already a couple of years ago that, hey, if they are not necessarily winning the Berlin and New York and Boston marathons, maybe they can win trail races. So money definitely helps. But also the fact that some of these trainers come from Europe and see the potential. But again, Sierre Zenal has always been a race that has attracted road runners. because it goes more uphill and flat and only a little downhill at the end, which is easier to do for a road runner than a complete technical up and down and 50k plus ultra, which is much more difficult to train for as a road runner.
I mean, the thing has changed so much. Back in the day, if you were a 207, 208 person, you could be winning majors. But today, if you're a 208 person in Africa, you're just one of hundreds, maybe thousands of people. And as we know, the jump from 208 to 202, I was watching some of the Olympic marathon, obviously, that went on. And on the start line, almost nobody's PB was above 210. Half of the field's PB was 203, 204. There was a few 202s. I'm like, wow, 2010 used to be fast. No more. So you've got to find something else to do with what you have.
One comment, Salomon, you just mentioned, I want to pick it up. It's about the teams. And I saw the first, like Jolene, she's part of the Milimani runners, which I believe is also part of On Running. It's a separate team. And then we see the second team called Run Together On. Do you guys know if they're both from On, just different team names?
That I don't know, but the Run Together again is the one that I'm quite sure is an Austrian coach that is somewhat involved. That's at least what I saw in the documentary. There's also this Golden Trail series documentaries, and it was quite interesting to see the team is already working on going towards trail running since a longer time. But On, of course, a Swiss brand. We can also be proud of a Swiss. There was a time where people thought there doesn't have to be another running shoe, but On came and created another running shoe. So helps maybe also to bring more people into trail running.
Interesting, yeah, because I can find a lot of information about the Milimani team, but I can't find anything about the Run Together On team. So maybe if I want to dig into it another show, but that's something worth talking, that maybe On has two teams, maybe not. But then if they do, then they have had a successful race for sure, with pretty much taking 6 out of the top 10 on both male and female. In any case, back to you, Salomon. We are going to kick it off with a quote I found on your LinkedIn profile, which I thought I should point out. It is saying, one of the most important principles of success is developing the habit of going the extra mile, from Napoleon Hill. Coincidental, our podcast is called One More K, not the One More Mile. But where do you take that quote from, and why do you put it on your LinkedIn?
Yeah, so first of all, as you introduced me before, I'm definitely a person who brings the two worlds of being a runner and being an entrepreneur together. So I love to also take quotes from sports or other elements into my business and vice versa. And by the way, even for clients, I've done some motivational speeches. So definitely running has a very important element in also my professional life. By the way, you can see here this 8 is the Synpulse8, the company that I also own together with other partners and run globally. And it also has the T8,
Whoa.
which from John Ellis and team, Mark, that helped me to create these shirts. So I'm also promoting a bit the Hong Kong brand here. And that's also why I'm not wearing red, because people will probably wonder, hey, he's always running in red, why is he wearing black now? So that shows the mix. But to come back to, yes, I love your podcast name, running. Of course, the extra K or extra 1 mile is a very important element. It shows that while you might have incredible talent, in the end, it's really how much you go beyond your boundaries. And I always say that I'm probably not the most talented runner. I'm also not the smartest person. So to be successful doesn't mean you have to be most talented or the smartest person. You have to be very dedicated. You have to really work harder. And that was even something that Jensen Huang, CEO at NVIDIA, has said many times. He calls it even, you need resilience as a key for success. And one point I could also put on LinkedIn I really love is he wishes especially fresh graduates a certain ample dose of pain and suffering. I just put that on my Strava run this morning, coincidentally, because it is all about suffering in these races as well, and you learn from that suffering. And I can guarantee you that Kylian Jornet, we talked about before, is suffering a lot in his training sessions. He does things like running a vertical K uphill under 30 minutes. He has the world record in vertical Ks. He's going nuts uphill. And then he goes down and then he runs a sub 30 10K. That's one of his best training exercises, and I've adapted some of these principles as well, not as fast obviously, but doing some uphills and then flats and so on. And I did this morning my usual Monday morning run, which is actually the threshold speed training that I do at least once a week, and I always do it on Monday morning. Get up at 5:30. At 6 a.m. I start the training, do 20K with lots of speed and threshold. And in this humidity and heat in Hong Kong at the moment with more than 30 degrees, it almost kills you, right? And people would just say, why are you doing this? This is stupid. But it's not only to train really myself physically, but it's also mental. And I always say, if I start like this into the week, I will have the mental mindset to really run the business and be ready to anything that gets thrown at me. So these principles are so important to be a successful athlete as well as a successful entrepreneur.
We've talked about this, Salomon, and I think we both, believe that deeply. I get asked, so I'm going to ask you, when you first started running, and so I'm going to ask you your running history, but suffering is not obvious when you first start. It's obvious to you today. Starting Monday with a suffer session is amazing. But maybe tell us your story of how you started it, because I don't think anybody wakes up and just figures it out immediately. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I have to say, I was always doing sports. Before I went into more running, I was playing football as a consultant, where you're traveling and work hard till late nights. You cannot commit so much to team sports anymore. So I moved them more into a sport that I can also do myself anywhere. You can always bring a pair of shoes. So running was easier, but I was always doing sports. I always also had the competitive element. I cannot just do a sports just to, I want to feel the outdoors and so on. That's not me. You know me well enough. So if I don't have the race coming up, for example, in 3 to 6 months, I won't go so much into suffering as if you just do it as a balance. You would say, hey, today is not the day and so on. I need a milestone ahead of me. I need something I need to work for, and I need something that pushes me out of the limits, something either further or I want to be faster or whatever. So I have to work for it and to improve. The suffering you then start to realize is just the necessary evil, because you cannot improve if you don't go out of your comfort zone. And there is good podcasts here also from, for example, Andy Galpin, who of course is into sports science, who will tell you really it's all about the hard work. There's also a good book about this. It's for example, VO2 max training. It's not just the volume, which is also important, but if you're not pushing your VO2 max in specific trainings, you will also not improve enough. And it's, by the way, also the most important element to work on your longevity if you do VO2 max. But that's, of course, painful. It's not easy to do VO2 max training.
So did you start, you were playing football, and you're right. I think team sports, when you have a proper job, life, family, everything, running is the easiest one to do. So did you throw on a pair of shoes? Obviously you were fit. Did you do the normal thing, 5K, 10K, half marathon, ultra, or what was your progression?
Yeah, so first of all, also in playing football, I was not the most talented, but I was the one who was able to run 90 minutes up and down as a winger or as a midfield player. So running was a bit more natural for me, even though with soccer shoes rather than the road running shoes. And it took me, by the way, a bit of a while to get more into also the right runner technique, because if you just do it as a training for football, you're actually not having the proper form. So that took me a while. But I was different to maybe others. I was never much into road running. I loved the trails. I loved the mountains. And again, growing up in Switzerland, I was always going also to the mountains. I loved to go up the mountains. But I never liked the fact of having heavy shoes and having heavy backpacks. And started to see then these type of events where people were running up a mountain. I was feeling like, hey, that's actually crazy. How is this possible? And so then these races again in Europe, it started already decades ago. When in Asia, it only picked up maybe 10, 15 years ago. So I did the first, actually, then half marathon on trails, which is called the Lantau half marathon in Switzerland. It was along a glacier, beautiful race, rather than a road race. And up to today, I've never officially done a road marathon. A lot of people are asking me, what is your time? What can you do? I did a catchwater version as a training run. I did a 2:50 time on a catchwater, and then I did the VK up Lantau Peak.
I remember, Salomon, I remember seeing that on Strava. It was before we knew each other quite so well. And I remember, that it was on Strava. I was like, I used to live on Lantau. 250, then he went up and down. That was your homage to Killian's 30-30, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I wanted to see, would I feel comfortable to just do a sub-3 marathon road racing? Because if I would go for a marathon, I want to, of course, then maybe target a 2:30 or whatever. I wouldn't be that amazing because I've never trained for road races, but I also don't want to be the guy then people feel like, hey, you should be faster. And that's why I wanted to give it a go also in a combination of this type of Killian training principles. Never say no. It might be at some day that I sign up for a road marathon, but I currently still focus more on the trails, of course.
So this might be a big jump across. There's a half marathon, there's marathon that you did on the catchwater yourself, and I may be jumping too far ahead. I mean, there's a term that Dylan Bowman uses called Vision Quest, which are these massive epics. I think 4 trails is certainly, for me, in Asia, as Vision Quest as it gets. You have had some epics out there, my friend. I have watched some of the documentaries. I have seen those. Look, I know why you do it, but I never ask people why they do it. I think that's a stupid question. When you first set out on that Vision Quest, was that something that was all-consuming? Did you build up to it? And I would love to hear a bit of the story about that, because to me, that's real ultra.
Yes, first of all, I'm, of course, a proponent of any distance, any terrain, kind of what I think Sage Canada is always saying. So that's why I also love to do a bit of road running here and there, and shorter distances as well, and prove that you can do both distances. I recently did first time win an 18K here in Saikung. And I was surprised because some of the youngsters half my age, they were pushing really hard at the beginning. It was so tough. 18K can be as tough as a 4K, sometimes you feel. But definitely my heart is towards the real long distance, as yours as well, Ned. I always feel this is kind of an adventure. And whenever it gets really mental, it's just much more interesting. I mean, doing this overnight, the 2-3 nights and so on, there's so much going on that you cannot control. And that was always fascinating to me. When I came to Asia 12, 13 years ago, I, for example, then did quite early, I think it was about 10 years ago, races in Southeast Asia, like, for example, Rinjani. Rinjani is that volcano that Hendra, really also famous guy in Asia for brutal races. And I just did the 52K. Back then it was the only one, and I barely survived, super slow, but I loved the adventure. I was still living in Singapore, training on Bukit Timah Hill for a Rinjani, 3,700 meters. It was crazy, but I loved that adventure type event. And when I then looked at going probably to Hong Kong, relocating to Hong Kong 8-9 years ago, I saw also that event that of course, everyone speaks about Fortrace that Andre Bloomberg invented. And that specific type of, it's not a race, it's a challenge with self-supported, with the 4 longest trails in Hong Kong put together. Really unbelievable challenge. At the beginning, I felt like, yeah, they're all crazy. I then watched the first finishes in 2017. Tom Robertshaw back then and Stone, and I just loved it immediately. And I said, I have to go after this. Of course, you have to also apply and so on. It's a long process. You need to prove yourself first. I had to do my first 100 milers, did a 214 kilometer in Switzerland. So you cannot just sign up, Andre will not let you. So you have to apply, you have to put your essay in. But then also, if you want to have a shot in breaking 60, of course, you need to also dedicate a lot of time and preparation. And whenever I put up a challenge, I don't just go for it and see how it goes. I, of course, want to succeed in the challenge, which also means I will put everything in it. And I took a year, basically, of preparation for the 2018 first version, where I participated and finished. Where I knew after I did the 214K that physically I can do it in time. I knew that if I put things together, it could work. But I knew it's just mentally such a tremendous challenge that even if physically you can run it, there's so many things that could go wrong. So I had to also put in challenges on, okay, do overnighters all by yourself and going up Lantau peaks, or other things. So how do you prepare yourself mentally? But then also nutrition plans and all the other things. And that again comes back to the company, to Synpulse Management Consulting, engineering. So you basically have to do project planning, right? And then you have to do nutrition planning. You have to do all the things that I love to do as in my business. And that fits even more the style of these ultras. Of it's not just physical, it's also mental, it's also preparation, it's dedication and so on.
When I check your results, you win Lantau70, you win Trans-NT 2019, you win Lantau50, you win Trans-Lantau 100 kilometers, and then you have a DNF at Trans-Lantau 100 miles.
Yeah, first of all, there was a time that right during and end of COVID, after COVID, where I had for a season, I think all the major Lantau races as basically the current champion. That was Lantau70 back then, Trans-Lantau, Lantau50. So I was proud of that, and not anymore, meanwhile, because I'm also not living on Lantau anymore, but Lantau was my home for a long time, and I knew the trails in and out, and really optimized every single trail section. While, of course, they're all quite competitive races, also Lantau70, there were John Ellis and other strong runners there. I didn't win it, probably when the fastest guys were in Hong Kong. For example, Long Fei, who has the record in Lantau70. I'm very conscious that, yes, I can perform on a, call it local level. That's also, if you look at the UTMB scores, 700 to 800 is a bit the, call it local elite, but not the international ones, let's be honest. I mean, 800 plus, and I saw this when I race in Europe again, or the 900 plus like Higgins, that's a complete different level. So I cannot compete on that level, but I can compete locally. And Trans-Lantau was the first time now, again, as part of the UTMB series, where they, of course, brought all the international elites to Hong Kong, and I love it, and I will do it again this November, because then it's even more fun when you race against these elites. But I have to say I had a bit of an injury when I went into that race. I knew I'm not in the best shape. But you get immediately also super excited if you have these elites running with you. And I was even catching on Julia Chaurier, is one of probably the all-time famous guys that people may know because he won UTMF and so on. So you feel like, hey, wow, okay, I can run on that level. It was super hot and humid, as typical, but not as typical in November. So there were a combination of two things. One is I immediately felt on the sunset peak climb, my Achilles unfortunately burning and flaring up, and that's not good already in the first third of the race when you want to really compete. And the second thing is that with the humidity and so on, I was also already starting to feel a bit of cramps, and that was also way too early. And the combination of the two that just showed me, okay, I'm not here to just finish. I'm here to really race on that level, and I couldn't do that anymore. So watch me hopefully in November do better. I love that race, so I will be back.
Did you? So I know you are a prepared, thoughtful dude. When you stood on the start line with all those elites around you, did your plan go away a little bit? Because did you charge off after them? Because as you said, look, you are more than capable on local level, and you're very good on international. But you're right, the best of the best. How was it standing on the start line? Did you think, oh, what the hell? If they run, I'm going with them no matter what. Was that the thought process?
No, of course not. I mean, I'm experienced enough not to do that. I learned my lessons early on. No, I actually was running exactly on time. So after the first few K, they already were boosting as fast as they can, and that would have been way too fast. And I'm also, again, not competing with a 900 plus UTMB scored runner. No, actually, I did run my splits, and I could have also continued without the Achilles, probably close to my splits, but it was more humid and very humid, more humid than anyone would have thought, and the race times were much slower than previous years. So even the top elites that were top three, they all were much slower than usually on this course, and they all really suffered. So I think everyone went hard in comparison to the conditions, and that's always so tough in Hong Kong. Also, Hong Kong 100. This Hong Kong 100 this year was much hotter than recent years, and you feel like, oh, it's January, you should be running fast, and then it just hits you.
What do the international runners think of Hong Kong? Because you hear them sometimes on podcasts, people who come and they're like, oh, it's steps. It's a huge amount of steps. The trails are different. Did you get a chance to chat to them? What did they think about the Hong Kong scene and the Hong Kong trails?
Yeah, I was actually also talking at the Hong Kong 100. I was at the start line. There was Tyler Green next to me. That's a very strong runner from the US. Was giving him the tip, don't run with the Chinese runners from the beginning. I mean, they are brilliant runners, but some of them also push very hard from the beginning. And I told him you will have enough time in the second half. As we all know, Hong Kong 100 starts a bit flatter, not flat, but flatter than what it does on the second half. And he did that, and he finished, I think, second or third. So very well. So it was interesting to chat. And when I came to Hong Kong from Singapore and from Europe, I, of course, complained a lot about stairs. Meanwhile, when I go to European races, I swear, why are there no stairs? It's so technical. You go over rock boulders and snow downhill, and you feel like, hey, where are my stairs? So you get used to, but you forget how different it is compared to European and US races. So for them, of course, it's very hard. Plus, what I think is even harder, they come in the off season in winter when they may train even doing skimo or other things in the cold, and then they come here and they have to run in 20 plus degrees, which is not as hot as in summer, of course, but still much warmer than the conditions in Europe. And I think Tyler Green was probably a bit in a warmer region than others, but many blow up because they
just can't, yeah. And so, to follow on for 4 trails, when it went sub 48, which just seemed unbelievable. I've watched all the documentaries. I used to dot watch, I have dot watched that race, which is ridiculous. And will they make it for the ferry? So here's a question, Salomon. Given the Hong Kong trails are so unique, and given those trails, do you think anyone apart from a Hong Kong-based runner could really win it if it went sub 48? Do you think it has that race, that very particular race, given there's no poles, there's no music, this is, to me, right on the outer edge. Do you think it can only be a Hong Kong person who wins this race, or not?
Yeah, so first of all, I think this unique challenge of self-supported and all these things like no polls and no music and so on make it, of course, much more complex. And there's a bit of an advantage if you know the trails here, as you are also, of course, navigating yourself. Meanwhile, the watches are a bit too accurate, and I told Andre a few times already, make sure you put a new rule on that you cannot use the GPS watches. Maybe it does that at some point. The first time when I did it, I didn't use any. I used a GPS watch, but I didn't use the maps. So really going after navigating myself. So if you think of this, so sub 48, definitely my plan actually for the sub 50 was had a second plan that even showed sub 48 because I knew that physically that could be possible if everything goes perfect, perfect conditions and so on. Perfect conditions would have been cooler for sure. I hate when it's hot, and that's probably still the European side of me. I like it cool, but somehow never cool on Chinese New Year, even though it's still January, February. But anyway, so I know it's possible, especially if you know the course very well. If you would invite the Killian and he would have wrecked the course and so on, I mean, it would not even be fun. Of course, he could go faster, right? He's then sub 45. But it's not the same thing because what I love about Fortress is that it's not just the pros. There's almost no pros. It's everyone, every single type of personality who is also, I don't know, a mom with kids or a teacher or a professor like Will Hayward or running a business like myself, right? You have to put in the hours in training in the early morning at 6 a.m. or in the evening at 10 p.m. You have to commit yourself while running a business or doing another job. It's just much, much harder. And in that sense, I find it more impressive for people also surviving sub 72 hours that have a normal life in between and are not professionals, right? So, yes, I think the time could be faster, but Andre also said he likes the fact that it's not now an elite race, but it's really a race for everyone. Or a challenge for everyone.
Well, I'm going to hand over to Marcus, talk a little bit about business, but I've thought about the green post box myself, Salomon. I lived in Hong Kong for 10 years. I've been on these trails before. All I would be looking would be to survive. It just looks such... You've done it 2 or 3 times now, Salomon.
I finished 2 times, and that makes it even harder the second time. And that's also a reason why I went for that sub 50 goal, because you need to find a unique new challenge to do it again. Because it's so hard, it's so painful. And the moment you are in the second night or the moment you hit second half of Wilson Trail, I mean, it gets you anyway, right? You will be crying, you will be scrambling, you will be swearing, whatever you do, right? What is then the motivation to do it again? And that's why I needed a new goal, not just to finish again. And actually, I found then the even much bigger spirit in the end. If you watch Fortress, you would see that for me, then at that moment where I completely killed my quads with this rhabdomyolysis. Rhabdo is basically a condition where your muscles are breaking apart. So I had a physical condition. It was like an injury. It's not that I just was tired, right? If I would have known the condition, I would have probably pulled out because it's quite dangerous. So my kidney was actually not working anymore. I had Coke colored pee, which shows you that the kidney is failing. So it's really not a good condition to have, right? And I still finished in still a reasonable time. And that was only due to the people in Hong Kong, my team at Synpulse, and also my friends at Huglo and all the other teams. And of course, Manu, my wife, most important, who was pregnant at that time with our boy, Nate, who I then also, we call him Nathaniel Phoenix, because Phoenix is the mountain on Lantau. Lantau is actually called Phoenix. So that all had a story, right, that pushed me somewhat emotionally, mentally to continue while I knew that I cannot break the time anymore. And if you watch also Fortress, you see all these different stories of why someone then just continues, and it doesn't matter again what time it actually eventually is it surviving, is it finishing, but what way do you find, and it's what Andre calls what's really basically your why, what's your purpose basically. And I meanwhile use this in my own motivational speeches and also in front of my team in difficult projects. You need to find your why, you need to find your purpose. And then you can, it like backyard, what you're preparing for, right? If you have that purpose, you will go way beyond, right? You might not be the fastest, but you can continue and go way further than you would have thought. Again, why I love also ultra running, it's not just about the time, it's really just how far you go.
Let's switch gears a bit into the business side. Again, I'm playing with stereotypes now. I'm sure that you, as a Swiss, you like numbers, and as a consultant, you like numbers. So what are current numbers in trends you are tracking or you are surprised of in this trail running world?
Yeah, so, I mean, again, I really love to also support entrepreneurs in running and in trail running and endurance sports. And I was also watching and listening to some of the podcasts when I talked to John Ellis and so on. And it's just amazing when you look at how many races we had 10 years ago, trail running events, ultra events, how many we have today. If you look at, and yes, I know you've discussed this here in the podcast a few times, a bit of also the professionalization of the sports with UTMB and of course Ironman behind. So I, of course, watch the growth numbers. I love that on ITRA or also UTMB, you do not only see your score, but you also see score versus other people. There's always the saying of actually if you finish a marathon, you are only one of a few percentages globally, right? Because not many are even just trying to finish a marathon. If you then do it under 3 hours, you're already on the 0.0001 or whatever. And let's not even talk about then the sub 210 or whatever it is. And the same is also with the distance, of course, doing a UTMB and so on. So it's amazing how the sport has been growing. What I still feel, and that's what I'm following a bit, is it needs to also become more professional. Why do I believe that's the case? I love the raw events, and they also need to exist. They have a purpose to exist. But as we said before, Sierre Zenal, if there's no money in it, the Kenyans might not do it, right? People need to survive. Entrepreneurs need to survive. Runners need to survive. I have a few friends here in Asia, very talented runners. For example, Stingray, right? Very talented runner, but he couldn't survive in Hong Kong anymore. They didn't pay him enough that he could just afford to pay rent in Hong Kong, right? And he was stuck in this situation and asked me also what to do. And there's many of such runners that cannot even afford to go to a UTMB. And that we discussed this before. My race was shortened. I was a bit annoyed. I paid, of course, a lot of money for the trip and everything, but I can afford it, right? But the person from Indonesia or the Philippines, Thailand, how can they afford it? And that's why we need this also be a bit more professional, or find other means that we can also finance people to travel, finance, of course, also that the people can afford the gear, finance that these entrepreneurs are also surviving. And I always say, when I talk to, of course, Romain from Uglo or John Ellis and Mark from T8, I don't want any money. I wear your stuff to show to the world that this is great things you are doing. I love the Uglo shirts, I love the T8 shirts. I don't want they even gave me some stuff for free, and I said, hey, I want to actually pay for it. I want that you're successful. And this is for me important when I look at the metrics is, how does profitability also increase in these businesses? How can they sustainably grow and not just, 2-3 years of great stuff, but I can just not do it anymore? And unfortunately, I just saw the news that Lantau Base Camp, that I also ran for and supported with John and the team, they have to shut down. The landlord in Hong Kong, and this is a big story all the time, doesn't want to decrease rent. And I looked into Lantau Base Camp myself personally. I was once considering to take over that job before John did. But then also realized how tough the business is. You can just not make money with such business. And here in Hong Kong, at least, and that's just brutal. And it's on all of us playing a part in this sport to help that there's really also money to make. Otherwise, we can just say, okay, we just run naked without shoes and just go onto the trails natural, fine. But if you want to have the right shoes, the right shirts, and so on, then someone needs to be able to make money.
Who is this? Totally agree. Is our sport too small? Who is the someone? Because I hear you. But you're a smart entrepreneur. Marcus is running an Asian trail running brand right now. We all know it's hard. Is there an obvious solution we're missing? Or is our sport just too small?
No, so it's definitely not too small. If you look at the numbers, it's a big sport already. And I think, again, that's also the positive side of a UTMB. I talked to Clement for a while, who invented Lantau, also one of the older races, one of the big races in Hong Kong. And yes, there's a few things that happened, weren't too smart. Maybe when it comes to in trail running, you love nature, right? You don't want to see nature destroyed. I hate it when I see garbage on the trails, right? So there needs to be also always sustainability when it comes to trail running, right? And maybe a car brand is not the first brand you should choose for trail running, right? So there's certain things that maybe didn't go as well, but in the end, making the sports more professional and also profitable, that it's not, I mean, yes, some people have earned enough money with their main business. John Ellis said it in your podcast, that his main job is still financing him, right? Otherwise, he couldn't do it. And if someone wants to really put all his energy and effort into running, either as an athlete or as an entrepreneur, he will not be able to do that in most cases. I see now also for so we should bring him onto the podcast with Bix. So it's going towards that direction. They can more do it. So I think what is important is that we also as athletes, right, of course, help these brands to grow. And again, I do this. We also accept that maybe certain things will change when it becomes more professional. It might not be all in the way that we love it. And I mean, as an entrepreneur, I know it. I cannot just do only charity type of work. I have to do also work that pays the bills, the salaries of my people. So certain things will need to be accepted. You can still have the backyards and so on that are really rural and no money in it, but there should also be races with money in it. And Sierre Zenal shows already that in probably 5 to 10 years from now, there's enough money to finally also help businesses to be profitable.
If we would give you right now $1 million, which I believe would give you a bit of money in Hong Kong, not that much in other countries, you could quit your job and you could start a business in trail running. What kind of business would that be?
I think the few examples we now discussed before, T8, Uglo, but also Bix from Vlad, shows that there's always a certain gap, a niche, where you can bring a product. So distribution, like shops and so on, is very hard. That's really, and then margin fights and so on. So there's only a few shops that have really survived long enough, and that's really hard for them. I think it goes down to the products. And we said it before, On brought another running shoe, even though there's been already so many running shoes. If you hit with a good product, you will find the market. And for me, Bix from Vlad is one of the best examples. And Marcus, apologies, I don't know your product as much as I know Bix from Vlad, because I talked to him many times. He actually produced it in Germany, which you probably quite like, Marcus. We had also discussed, for example, some unfortunate events of other products that actually where it was discovered, Spring Energy Gels, that didn't really deliver what the people thought they would deliver, right? So it actually didn't even bring the calories they advertised is on it. And he went through all the stages in Germany and Switzerland. It's much tougher sometimes to get a product really to market. So we had to go through all the hurdles, but now you can guarantee that really what is written on it is in it, right? And it's a brilliant product. in a sense of there's so many gels, there's so many drinks out there, but there was not really the after run nutrition of you just take one of these tablets and it has magnesium, it has all the things in you need, right? So there was a gap clearly that he identified that immediately took off, right? And he's making, I believe now, okay money, not yet the big money, but goes in a good direction. And I hope, Marcus, also you with your product, you nail that gap and you have that quality that people see. I always say, as a Swiss, quality is most important. And I loved also what Romain and John said. I mean, they are copied already many times. But the quality of also these Uglo and T8 shirts is really nice. And even though they're produced in China, they have top-notch quality. And if I would have that million, I would look at any of those gaps, maybe in a nutrition or gear, where I feel there I could go in with it.
Now it's time for our official sponsor Lecker to have a break. No, I'm just kidding. No, thank you for Salomon for the plug. Ned, you just recently tried our products. I just wanted to give you the chance to air some positive words if you want, but otherwise, please ask a question to Salomon.
Well, I'm going to say I'm in Bali, did a 40K run. The one thing I found was that one of the Leckers is sour, not sweet, and it was so interesting. I'm like, oh my God, it's sour. It was such a great change. Real food. It tasted like it was super good. But I'm going to make a comment here, Salomon. Have you followed Ketone-IQ, that new product, Salomon?
Yeah, I did, and I even tried it, I have to admit, a couple of months ago. I try new things as long as it's not on a doping list or whatever, of course. But I always love to try new things. And I tried Ketone-IQ. Didn't really think of any improvement. It tasted horrible, but that I think is part of the product. I don't know enough to really say it helps. But
I listened. So I listened to Dylan Bowman as I ran because Ketone sponsors them. They're an 8-figure business. They're over 10 million rev. Their first contract was the Army. Then they got in the Tour de France. I don't think they're just an 8-figure. I think they're close to a 9-figure business. And he made a statement. So, Salomon, to your point, if you find a niche, this was his statement, and it just struck me. He said, ketones will be we are going to make ketones as obvious as electrolytes. And it was such a gap. The way he said that. Now, whether it's real, whether it works, I don't know. But clear. And do you know who his biggest investor is? Andreessen Horowitz. So it is the tech bros are in this. He's backed by and he said on the pod, you can listen. Dylan said, so how you must be enjoying life. He's like, yeah, just the other day Pepsi called me, Gatorade called me, Nestle called me. And he didn't sound like a show-off dude. He found a niche. Whether it works or not, or I don't know, but it does show within trail running, it can be. And he didn't start just in trail, but in endurance, in human performance. Fascinating. Like that's $1 billion business. Amazing.
But I mean, I think you don't need to necessarily find something completely new, right? I mean, I'm sure with Lecker, Marcus, you saw also that in Asia, there was not a product, maybe also in light of the nutrition in more, in a much hotter and humid environment, right? I mean, that's also why, for example, probably Vlad came up with pigs. There's no new elements in there, right? There's the same nutrients in there, but in a good combo that works quite well. The T8 shirts work extremely well here in Hong Kong, Asia, Southeast Asia, because they're light, and when you're completely sweaty, they're not soaked. Right? So it was not to invent completely new product, but something that worked in this environment. And again, Marcus, I will try Lecker very soon. I hope you have a distributor in Hong Kong. I was a bit closer, of course, to try certain things that I have here in my immediate remit. But I like that the people see someone is struggling with something, right? Struggling with getting too soaked in shirts or chafing the story of John Ellis going up Lantau Peak at 4 Trays. that is already enough, right? And there's still enough ideas out there. But then it's, and again, to the very important statement at the very beginning, then it's the hard work. You know it, Marcus, you know it, Ned, I'm an entrepreneur. It's not having the brilliant idea. It's making it a reality. And you have to work 10, 20, 30 years till people really start to buy your product enough that, and I like the bootstrapped entrepreneurs that do not just go and ask for 5 million, 10 million. Yes, we are also bootstrapped. So it's really putting your own money in, which makes it much more personal, and having to make it profitable already in the second or third year. You cannot just wait 10 years. I mean, there has been IPOs of, also on and other companies that have never been profitable. That's just crazy.
We are coming up to our hour. I'm going to ask you a last question before I give my little drop at the end. Marcus started this show with asking about your LinkedIn quote. I've been lucky enough to work with you a bit. We've never gone for a run. You'd have to run even slower with me than you did with that gentleman who was quicker. We were messaging the other day, and we were talking about some business stuff. And I asked you a question. This is a question I'm going to, maybe a final question. How much does and you've had success as a businessman, come from what you've learned in ultra and trail and running as a sportsman?
Sorry, I missed the question.
The question is how much of your success in business is derived from the mindset and what you learn from running?
Yeah, it's a very good question also to round off the discussion. And it's, for me, all about the resilience. Especially if you look at the times in Hong Kong during first protests, political environment, then COVID, where we were shut down from the world for quite a bit. It was tough, right? Running a business, not knowing what is in 3 months, can I still pay the salary of my employees? Was very hard. And that was also the time when I then prepared for 4Js in 21, the second time, where I had to stay resilient for my business, for my team, for my family that I also feed with the business. And this resilience, especially with ultra running, you learn, right? So putting the hard work in on a Monday morning, 5:30, 6 a.m., but then also when things go down, when you blow up on a 100-miler or a backyard and you want to give up, but you somehow keep pushing yourself through. And I have to say, younger generation sometimes, and that's why also Jensen Huang probably made that statement, they feel like, okay, a lot of high expectation, things which just flow naturally. But as we are 3 entrepreneurs, we know it's not the case. Things come unnaturally, get thrown at you, the tougher things you've never even thought of, and staying resilient and keep going at it is really what I bring from running. And that's why I will never stop also doing sports, even if I might be slower in 20, 30 years, but still doing that balance, challenge the balance to bring that resilience back into business. That's extremely important to me.
It makes so much sense. As you know, I can't leave a show without quoting Laz, Mr. Lazarus Lake. He said, "I think we would all be better with a bit more suffering," and that's basically what you said, Salomon. That learning of suffering is good.
Salomon, merci vielmals. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for being a great supporter. And for being an entrepreneur and being a great runner. We're excited about your next races. Hopefully they will do better than last time. But I think with your planning and dedication, it is pretty impressive. And your resilience, persistence, you will make it work. So thank you and good luck.
Thank you so much for having me, and continue this podcast. It's really amazing. Thank you.
As the last part of the show, you might know that, Salomon, we have the Ned's drop of wisdom, inspiration, wrapping it up with the Ned's wisdom, and I am keen to hand it over to Ned now. So Ned, please, over to you.
Well, thank you. And as Salomon does know, one of his races that was shortened was an inspiration for something I wrote, because Salomon messaged me because I'd been following Salomon training, and I know that this dude Salomon puts in a lot of work. It's not just the 5:30s. I've seen those training sessions. And when they message, and look, I've already said my piece on it. It wasn't that they had to shorten it; it was what they could have said. So yeah, one of your one of your experiences. So this one actually, I hadn't read your LinkedIn message, but anyway, this one's about a little bit about suffering, a little bit about going the extra mile. This one's called Edges. Edges. That's what it's all about. The middle path sucks. There's nothing there except meh. On the edge, with eyes wide, heart thumping, energy almost done, many hours in, where it could all go wrong. On the edge, you can fall off. It's scary, but it's where everything is, because not trying is not acceptable. I read once a quote which tells me about the edge. Don't reach for what you can. Reach for what you cannot. Cannot is the edge. That's where it is. First ultra, longest ultra, trying to win. Whatever you want, you can't get there without going till the edge. Run till you almost pass out. Run till your friends can't understand why. Run till your brain goes blank. Run till you can't finish. But always know why. Because the edge is life. The edge is where you may die. But it's also the only place you can truly live. This idea that life should be played in the narrow confines of safety, I don't believe our hard drive is designed for that. We are designed to go. Go faster, go further, go forever. Step out the door, turn left, not right. Go more, not less. Run to the edge and jump. You will never feel more alive. Get out there, Ned.
Thank you, Ned.
Well said.
Oh, welcome. I
love to live on the edge.
I will send to you both a marathon. There's, if you've not read, a gentleman called George Sheehan. George Sheehan is a runner and philosopher from the 60s and 70s, and he wrote some fabulous pieces. And it was his quote. It actually came up in a book I was reading, which was, "Do not reach for what you can, reach for what you cannot." And I love that phrase. People say, "I can't reach for what you can do." No, don't reach for what you can. Reach for what you cannot. So that was inspired the edges today.
On that note, we're coming to the edge of this podcast, so we don't want to jump over the cliff. Thank you so much, Salomon, again. Thank you, Ned. And anyone out there, thanks for listening. We appreciate support. Let us know what you think. Engage, subscribe, reach out anytime to Salomon on various channels. He also has his own podcast, by the way, on YouTube. Follow and subscribe. Ned, we all know, and myself, we are on One More K and Lecker Nutrition. See you next time. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.